But it's powerful. That goes back to resonance. When you're using the same language that they use to talk about these things, because you've listened and heard that language, now they're going to go like, wow, it's like you're inside my mind.
This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 290, Business and Marketing Strategies That Work, an interview with Jason Van Orden.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers, and today we have a very special guest, Jason Van Orden of Internet Business Mastery. You see, the thing is, 6 years ago, I was driving all over Iowa and Oklahoma slinging software. And on my travels, I was an avid podcast listener, and I was always looking for a good podcast on selling, but I couldn't find one that was a perfect fit. I was listening to a podcast called Internet Business Mastery, and it dawned on me that maybe I should start a podcast. My wife Denise and I, we started kicking around names, and we came up with the name Sales Babble, a name that still cracks me up. And I started the process of launching a podcast on the side, getting up early in the mornings to work on it before work. Back in those days, 95% of my software sales was due to working conferences and a good old-fashioned B2B enterprise sales. And the company that I worked for really didn't believe in marketing, and as such, I didn't know very much about marketing. If you recall, my education was in computer science, not business. So I decided to invest on studying marketing, and the Internet Business Mastery podcast had a class, and Jason was one of the authors. Well, I took that class, and I learned all about social selling, email drip campaigns, value propositions, copywriting, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. It was one of the best $500 I ever spent. Much of what I do here on Sales Babble is framed by that class, so I'm very, very fortunate to have Jason join me on Sales Babble to talk about marketing, sales, and how to find that perfect audience for your products and services. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Jason. Are you ready to babble?
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Pat.
Jason, it's such an honor to have you here on the podcast. Many years ago, 5-6 years ago, I took your course, yours and Jeremy Franson's course, Internet Business Mastery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, my background's sales, and I've been in sales and technology for years, but I knew nothing about marketing. And you guys taught me all about digital marketing.
Nice. Yeah.
And you did a pretty good job of it, too.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
A lot came from taking that course because I got to meet a lot of really great people that I am good friends with still today. People all over the world who were taking that class who I've been able to connect with them. People who live in Thailand and Japan and in England and in Florida and Colombia.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I was in mastermind groups all over because of Internet Business Mastery. And
so cool. Love that.
And how is it you became such an expert on these topics?
Yeah, so I started getting into digital marketing in the early 2000s, and the reason why is that I had a band, and I was very serious about my music, and I realized that in order to get people to listen to your music and come to your concerts, you needed to know marketing, and the internet was enough of a thing that I started, I don't know, there's a couple of books I read at the time. They were like early guerrilla marketing kind of books for musicians, and it talked about having an email list online and how to do your website, and that's where I started getting my toes wet with the whole digital marketing thing, and pretty quickly I started realizing, I like this stuff, and I'm actually kind of good at it. So then I just continued over the years to dive into it. Started learning from direct marketers like Dan Kennedy, for instance, and just, I started taking lots of courses, trial and error. Of course, we had the internet boom of the 90s. So like the internet's certainly been around longer than the 2000s, but that was still very nascent years of it. And I guess I just happened to be in there doing it. And so now, 15 or so years later, I've picked a few things up.
A big part of a number of the people in the course that I took with you wanted to start up their own businesses. Mm-hmm. And I saw a lot of these people start and fail, which is kind of the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Because one of the things that I have found in my consulting and working with startups is that people, it's very hard for them to get traction. It's very hard for them to grow. It's hard for them to get some momentum. And even though they may have a real passion about the business that they're in, they just can't seem to make it go. And I think the fundamental reason for that is that they don't understand exactly who they're selling to and what they're providing and stuff like that. And I'm kind of mystified by that whole thing.
Well, the nature of entrepreneurship is that it's an uncertain thing, obviously. And I think any entrepreneur would tell you they've tried and failed a number of times. And there's a lot of things, like anything, that's meaningful and also has some potential high reward. There's going to be false starts, but I'm sure something you heard Jeremy and I say many, many times is that there's no failure unless you just stop going, unless you quit, right? And so, and here's the thing: is it used to really bother me that I knew that people would take the course and not necessarily end up starting a business. But then I also, that once I'd been doing it long enough, being a trainer, an entrepreneur that had training to teach other entrepreneurs online for a while, I started realizing there were a lot of successful outcomes for people. And just because people originally signed up thinking they were going to start a business, sometimes they signed up, they learned a whole lot about what they wanted in life, because that was part of, we did a lot of mindset work and figure out what you want. So you create a business that's in alignment with that. And then sometimes people would realize, I don't actually want to start a business, but I learned a lot about what so now I'm going to go and create a life that's more in alignment with what I want. So, I think every person, and who knows, I know people that took the course and then years later, after taking it a second or third time, the thing finally hit. So there's just, everyone's on a different path, a different journey, and it was to us just to make the absolute best training that we could. And then the truth of the matter is there are people who just wow, this is more work than I thought, and maybe not worth it, or life gets in the way. So, there's a lot of reasons why that phenomenon happens. And, I would just hope that people would continue to check in with themselves about what they want, and continue to take consistent action towards those things. And whether it takes a few months or a few years or a lifetime, you keep trying them for them, and failure would definitely be a part of that path.
I totally get that, and I saw that with a number of the people that I got to know, was that after digging into it and working on it, they're going, I don't want to do this. This is not really what I want to do. Right. But that's not really the thing I really want to chat about today. The thing I really want to chat about today is, I think there are some people who do have some really terrific ideas that they just had a stronger understanding of how this whole business transaction works. I provide, benefits to problems and solve problems for customers. How can people, what are some of the things that you would recommend that people can do to get a better handle on this, so that they do build products and services that, that are desired and loved, and they can actually be profitable?
Right. Well, the absolute first thing is to realize that, you need to know who it is that you're serving. And that might be such an obvious thing. Who's the audience? If you're speaking on stage, who's in the audience? If you're selling, who's sitting across the table? If you're an entrepreneur, who are you creating something for? If you're, an expert, it's like, who do you want to benefit from your information? And that might seem like such an obvious thing, but I see so often where people are far too general, and they feel like, well, my stuff, so it can help so many different kinds of people. I wanted to reach anybody and everybody who will listen. And that's the death knell right there, is if you don't know, if you aren't very specific, especially when starting out, your message, the thing you're selling, the thing you're creating for others, it has to be highly relevant and resonant for them to stop in their tracks in their, the stupor of the day to day. And we're so busy and inundated with so many pieces of input constantly. We've got a spam filter built into our brain out of survival to just so things don't even make it to our consciousness unless they really, if you think about the kinds of things that, I was talking about when I first moved to New York City, and in the first week, and I was sleeping in a bedroom that was facing one of the big avenues, and, delivery trucks would go up and down these avenues every night, and the back doors on these delivery trucks would go as they kind of hit potholes and things. And that would just bam, wake me up. And then after about a week, my brain no longer is oh, okay, that's not danger. Something's not going to be trucking through my bedroom about to kill me. And so this is the evolutionary lizard brain, that the spam filter that went to. So that's what you're trying to get through, right? It's you don't want to be the white noise in the background. So you got to know specifically who you are trying to reach, so that then the message can cut through that noise and have them stop for a second and go, oh, this looks like it might be relevant, and it's kind of, so let me look a little further, and then hopefully if it resonates a bit, now you're starting to earn a bit of trust. So that's step number one, and I think that goes beyond just demographics of age or gender, sex, whatever level of education. It's okay, who are these people? What is the outcome that they want? Why is it that they want this thing? Why haven't they reached it yet? There's one thing to like teach yoga to people who are all into like mindfulness and meditation. Another thing to teach yoga to people who sit at desks all day long and are trying to reverse the like horrible effects of sitting. It's another thing to teach it to people in their later years who realize that flexibility is going to keep them from getting injured, which is a problem when you get into the latter part of your life, right? So those are three different audiences for the exact same supposed product of yoga, and yet you need to know which one it is so that you're speaking to the right needs and the right outcomes.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. So what's the second thing?
Well, then it's about knowing what is the outcome that they want. So, for instance, I've had somebody recently said, "Hey, Jason, I want to start a business that teaches DSLR cameras, right? So it's these digital cameras with different lenses and stuff being put on it." And they said, "Is that a good idea?" And I said, no, it's not. And they said, "What are you talking about? People do a lot of like teaching about DSLR." I said, "Well, it's not a good idea until you know who you're teaching." And again, it's just like the yoga example. It's like, is it hobbyists who want to start, right? So who want to make some money off of their hobby? Is it like professional photographers who want to learn how to up their rates? So it's once you know specifically who you're serving, it's like, okay, well, what is the outcome that you want them to reach? We can get so enamored with our solution. It's like, oh, we've got the best solution, and here are the features, and here's why. It's got 5 different colors you can choose from, and it's like faster than this or that. It's like, no, okay, but in the end, somebody's going to buy into it. Even when you buy an iPhone, it's because there's like needs you're trying to fulfill. I mean, yes, there's the outcome of making a call, which actually I don't even use my iPhone for calls hardly ever, right? It's more about like belonging and connection and a window into the world. Like, so you got to know what is the outcome and what are the needs that you're fulfilling, because that's what you need to be speaking to. And so you want to define your messaging in terms of that. What are they trying to reach as an outcome, and what are the challenges that are keeping them from that outcome? And now speak to that, and the solution can come into the messaging later. You got to enter the conversation where they're already at right now. That's probably actually number 3 right there, is enter the conversation already going on in their mind, which is, know what it is that they're, where are they at, and meet them there. If you launch straight in, like the example I use there is paleo. Today you could say, I'm a paleo coach. And yes, there's people who know paleo and might have already decided, yes, I want to adopt a paleo lifestyle for whatever reasons, right? 10 years ago, paleo as a solution was like, nobody knew about it, right? So you needed to come out of the gate talking about weight loss or, avoiding, autoimmune problems or muscle building or whatever, right? You need to have spoken to that and meet people where they're at first, and then take them down a garden path of like, hey, I know you're facing these pains and these problems that are keeping you from such and such outcome. And here's some myths and misconceptions about that you might want to know. And I know what it's like to be stuck in your place, but let me give you a different perspective on it. And so you're doing all this, meeting them where they're at and like empathizing with the pain. And then eventually like, and guess what? There's this thing called paleo. And now, then you start talking. So usually it's like the solution you bring in a little bit later. You got to meet them where they're at first, and then kind of guide them to the awareness of the solution, and then the awareness of why you're the one to offer them that solution. And then finally the awareness of why they need that solution now and not 3 weeks, 3 months, or 3 years from now. So that would be number 3, is meet them where they're at.
How do you get this?
Jumped ahead there on you.
How do you get this information out of these people?
How do you get this information?
Because that's something where a lot of people struggle, is that they're not in dialogue with these people. They're not, and they don't know exactly how to get a handhold on that.
Right. You got to do a lot of listening and not too much talking. So, without selling, without your, putting as many of your preconceived notions aside as you can, you do customer discovery interviews, you have conversations, and like, that doesn't necessarily have to be like this formally set up in a white room sitting at a table. Like, no, like it could be at a conference and like a 5-minute conversation in the hallway. It could be something you set up formally, because you've got clients or past clients you want to talk to and dig deeper to better understand, or, prospects that maybe haven't come through yet. And you set up times to have coffee or to get on a Zoom conference call with them, and you ask them a lot of questions about, where are you at? You ask them about their, that's the answer, is that you interview them. And so what do you do to interview them? Well, you've got to ask them about their stories and their experience. One problem people say is like, well, I have this solution I'm thinking about. What do you think about that? And people, they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. Plus, they don't know what they don't know. And they actually, if you say, well, hey, if I could offer you the perfect solution, what would it be? And yeah, they might give you some good information, but then a lot of people actually don't know, because again, they might have bad assumptions about what the right solution is. They may or may not even be aware of your solution. So the point here is like ask them about their past experience, their current experience. What are they trying to do? What have they tried? Why haven't they reached the outcome they want? What are the frustrations they're running into? And then ask follow-up questions and ask them about why that's important to them. What difference would that make? And then you, as hopefully kind of the expert in what it is you're offering, you're kind of like now you've got the tea leaves in front of you, so to speak, and you read the tea leaves, you read between the lines, and you go, okay. Now I see what's really motivating them. I see where the unmet need is. I see where I can stand out and have a unique value proposition. And you have 5 or 10 or 15 of those conversations, and you start seeing some real interesting threads that you can follow through. And now you're going to be much more informed. Plus, now you have the exact language that they use to talk about their pains and their problems and desired solutions and challenges. And you can use that same language. I'm sure you've probably talked about this before in your podcast or sales trainings, that it's powerful. That goes back to resonance. When you're using the same language that they use to talk about these things because you've listened and heard that language, now they're going to go like, wow, it's like you're inside my mind. So you interview them and you ask these questions about their experiences. You listen to the language and you read the tea leaves, and then you come back with like, okay, now I think I know what the solution needs to be, what the messaging needs to be for offering that solution, and how I can cut through the noise and get their attention in a way that other people maybe are not.
So what happens if you can't provide that solution, or maybe is that an opportunity for you to understand solutions that you maybe have not thought about?
Absolutely. And that's why I say you kind of put your preconceived notions aside. Like if you go into thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I'm absolutely making a widget that's going to be blue and it's going to do this, this, and this, and this. It's the idea of like not leading the witness, to use some legal jargon there, right? It's if you're, and here's the thing is like, yeah, maybe after you've like asked some more general questions and listened to their experience, perhaps towards the end, once you've let them kind of more openly share where they're at, then you might get a little more specific, or in a follow-up interview, talk more about your solution. But absolutely, like you should stay open to the fact that the thing you think they want and that you are, hoping to validate and verify might not end up being the thing that's best. And so you want to look for those opportunities.
The thing is, sometimes people are very broad in what they're thinking. I'm of the notion of, the riches and the niches that you need to be to create a minimum viable product and try to focus in. But that's such a struggle sometimes to try to get what matters to them and what doesn't.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that comes with experience, and there's a lot of there's a great book out there called The Mom Test that goes deeper into like how do you ask these good questions and how do you avoid the main mistakes that people do when they're doing customer discovery. And it can be tricky because it requires empathy, and we're not always good at that. Empathy is a skill. It's something that we develop over time to be able to put ourselves in someone's shoes and decipher, infuse meaning to what they're saying and try to accurately better understand. So I think that just comes with time. And apologies for the siren that's about to go by. New York City. That's New York City for you right there.
I live very close to the Burlington Northern Railroad tracks. Train goes by every 20 minutes. Podcast listeners are probably used to hearing my trains go by. Like in the summer, I have the windows open. They could be extremely loud. So, yeah, that's New York City. In the last 5 or 6 years, how has internet marketing changed?
Well, I mean, yeah, so it's, obviously there's new tools that come around and there's new channels. And, when I got started, Facebook wasn't a thing. YouTube wasn't a thing, so there's always new things that pop up. But here's the biggest thing I'd say is that it's gotten noisier. Now, so does that mean that it's harder to get attention? Yes. Does that mean that there's less opportunity? No, not necessarily. I just think it means that people have to actually try harder to do the things that we've been talking about here, that the noise level has gone up. And so therefore, to cut through that noise level, you need to you've got two choices. You can either be more obnoxious as a marketer and seller. And, we've all seen the tactics that people use that then border on manipulation or are flat out manipulative. Or you can be the kind of salesperson and marketer that tries to be much more relevant, much more resonant, much more empathetic, speak the right language, listen to and find the unmet need. And the more you match up and know exactly who it is you're serving and how you can best serve them, and you do all this listening, okay, well, you know what, that's going to get people's attention, again, when they feel like you're inside of their head. So that's how it's changed. It's gotten noisier, and that's an opportunity for those who are willing to do the kind of work that we're talking about here.
See, and I think that goes right back to what we were talking about earlier, about entering the conversation that they already have, listening to what they're saying, and if you speak in their language, what did you say? Reflect it back? Isn't that how you said it? mirror back what they were saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So right, when you're making content, when you're sending emails, when you're, putting ads out there that are meant to get attention or to resonate, to earn trust, to move them towards a sale, as much as you can use the kind of language that they use to describe their pains, problems, challenges, desired outcomes, the more you tap into that resonance. And to take it even further, it's knowing, well, what are their values and where do those cross over with yours? And like people these days, I want to do business with somebody who, they feel like, oh, it's a little bit like, oh, could I hang out and have a beer with them kind of thing a bit. But it's like, people like to patronize companies who have similar values to theirs and that have purpose into them. It's like knowing what matters to your target market, even outside of, say, the specific problem you're solving and the product you're offering is, really, really important. And I mean, there's plenty of examples of that out there. I mean, you walk into a Whole Foods and it's very clear there's a specific type of person that they are, with their or organic living. And I just look around in a Whole Foods and like, they know exactly who their target market is. And they're, the people are coming here in droves paying high prices because they're so resonant in what they stand for. And they'll make decisions that sometimes don't necessarily have the most bottom line income sense, but because, it doesn't align with whatever values that they have in common with their target market and that they've communicated in their mission and vision. So those are things that matter these days too.
Before we move on here, because I know we got a hard stop, I got to let you go. But what's the one thing you want people to take away with from this conversation that we've had, about better understanding their market and marketing them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I were to sum up everything that I'm saying, I don't know if this is going to sound floofy or woo-woo or what to some people, but I have long said, and you've probably heard us because we said this all the time in our Internet Business Mastery training, the absolute most important skill, I believe, as a marketer, a salesperson, an entrepreneur, is empathy. The more that you are able to understand people, what motivates them, why they want what they want, understand what they want before they even know what they want, that's everything. Like especially if you don't want to be the obnoxious marketer, the obnoxious salesperson, if you're, trying to avoid manipulation, which I try to do myself, and, then empathy is everything. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I can't help but agree. How can people find you online?
Thanks for asking. So jasonvanorden.com, JASONVANORDEN.com. And if this kind of stuff resonates with people, by all means, I would invite them to click on the newsletter link and sign up for my email newsletter. I regularly talk. I mean, the themes of these things work into everything that I talk about in my newsletter and the content that I put out there. And the newsletter is the first place that stuff comes out. So that's what I would recommend.
What are you doing these days? Are you consulting? Are you selling courses? Are you doing
both?
Group coaching,
I do,
or what are you working on these days?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of, in general, I work with people who want to up their thought leadership, meaning using the digital space. They want to reach more people, be seen as a leading expert, impact more people with their ideas, and create new income streams in the digital space. That means coaches and consultants and speakers and authors. And I do that through one-on-one consulting, but I also do that through, for instance, tomorrow I'm starting an online workshop that's teaching people over 8 weeks how to package up their knowledge and create a digital course, because then that's the kind of thing that, doesn't require them to have to show up one-on-one and put in, X number of hours to make X number of dollars. They can sell their digital course and help more people in a more scalable way. So that's another example of way that I work with people. So yeah, I have courses, live online virtual workshops, and then I do one-on-one consulting as well.
Cool stuff. Yeah. Cool stuff. Well, Jason, I really appreciate it. As I mentioned before, it's quite an honor to have you babbling here on Sales Babble.
Nice.
Thank you for everything that you've done.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks, Pat, for keeping in touch all these years and inviting me to come on your show.
As you know, I have a class on sales called Selling with Confidence. I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast. I've had some ads like in the middle most recently, and it focuses on B2B sales for people who don't have a background in sales. There's a number of modules in the class on cold calling and prospecting and email campaigns, presentations, closing, and stuff like that. And whenever somebody completes a module, I'll get an email, and I got one just the other day. One of my students has been working on the class for quite a while, and I can see her progress. And I asked her how it was going, and this is what Raylan Wallach said. She said, quote, "I am loving it. Excited to start using some of the tools. I think the way you have the course is great. It builds each lesson upon the last lesson and has great homework that applies to get you ready to utilize what you are learning. Thanks for the great program. Isn't that kind of her? That is pretty awesome. I'm glad to have gotten to meet her, and we're getting ready to hop on a call in the next few weeks to chit-chat about this. But I bring this up for a reason, and I want to be clear. This is an advertisement for this class, and I'd like you to think about enrolling. It's $200. It's not a lot of money, and you're going to get a quick ROI. And the thing is this, unlike other professions, when it comes to sales organizations, they're notorious for not training their people. Hey, think about it. You've probably got some expertise in a profession. You've got a certificate, a degree. Maybe you've got a skill that you've earned from 10,000 hours of practice. Yet when it comes to selling, you might very well have zip. That was the case for me when I got started. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, that's why I took Jason's class for marketing, because that's what I wanted to learn, because I wanted to grow in my profession, and I wanted to invest in myself. The thing is, you don't own your job. It can be taken away from you anytime. Trust me, I've been there. I've had it taken away from me a number of times. But what you do own is your own profession. Again, if you want to start selling with confidence today, this is an advertisement. I highly recommend you going to www.salesbabble.com. Go to the homepage and read all about the class. And if you got any questions, don't hesitate to email or give me a call. I am patient as an oyster. Again, I want to thank Jason Van Orden for visiting us here on Sales Babble. You can find links to his webpage at www.salesbabble.com/290. That's all I've got for this week. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.